Hey guys, what is up? SuperKmanrocks here, and I'm here for my Week 5 NA Academy overview, analysis, and of course, at the end, my power rankings. Just a little housekeeping before we jump into the video. Like I've said in the past couple videos that I've posted, both my LEC and my LCS one the past few days, I did test positive for COVID, so if you can notice that my voice is a little bit, how should we say, not perfect, if it's a little scratchy, a little bit, I'm a little bit quieter, maybe not as energetic. Fortunately, that's just the price we're gonna have to pay to get this video out this weekend. But I'm, no ill effects on the brain as far as I'm aware. So the information I should be giving should still just be as accurate as it would have been otherwise. But outside of that, we're just gonna run down all 15. Yes, that's right, 15 series that we had in NA Academy in Week 5. If you guys are excited and are interested in that, please go ahead and let me know down in the comment section below. But without further ado, we've got a lot to get into here, so let's jump right into our first series of the week. And kicking off Week 5 here, Day 1, was a series between Dignitas Academy and CLG Academy. A couple of roster changes here to talk about before we jump into the game. We can talk about CLG first. Obviously, Rosethorn has been officially demoted down to CLG Prime, and will officially be playing on the amateur team there for CLG, as Kevy has finally come in here from OS to take over the Academy jungle spot. Dokla is in the top lane for CLG. I don't know the exact specifics of what happened, but Jenkins tweeted out that he was hit by a car. He plays later in the week. Not exactly sure if that's a troll or not, but Dokla played in this series against Dignitas, and then for Dig, Hoon is actually up in the top lane now. They seem to have replaced Tony Top with Hoon, who I really don't know a ton about. I haven't really seen a lot. I haven't had a lot of time to go back and watch stuff that Hoon has done. He's an import from Korea. Not super familiar with him. This was really the first series I got to see him, full in action. But, yeah, I mean, let's talk about what we saw in this series. What we saw was CLG just being the better team. Even though both games were very close, especially Game 2, I should note, was a very close game that CLG were able to pull out, but really this was the battle of positives versus the battle of negatives. There are a couple players, I think, on each team that have really been, like, the backbones of each team most of the year. Obviously, for CLG, I think Breezy's had a really good year, and Triple those are the two players that I think you've seen a lot of the resources for CLG Academy be dumped into. And then, of course, with Dokla here, you want to put him on a carry. He's the best player that you have. And then for Dignitas, it's been Spawn all year long. Spawn has actually had a genuinely phenomenal year, an MVP caliber year here in Academy so far. And those two competing forces were definitely playing against each other. Whereas I definitely think not everybody on both teams lived up to the rest of that exposure, I should say. But CLG does come away with the 2-0 win. Triple's going to get my player of the series here. He's been up and down a little bit, but he had such a phenomenal Game 1 here on the Azir into the Kog'Maw. A tough matchup relatively for the Azir because Kog'Maw is one of the few champions of the game that I think can outrange you and can outdamage you late game if you let it get there, but Insanity just wasn't able to get to that point. Triple got super far ahead, was able to snowball it out of control, and then Dokla kind of took over in that Game 2 on the Yone, both games of Yone here for Dokla, so a good series here from CLG. Not much to talk about, honestly. Kevy, the new jungler coming in, was fine. He didn't have a great series. He didn't have a bad series. He was much better in Game 1, I think, on the Wukong than he was on the Viego in Game 2, where we definitely saw some problems. But XU obviously I think, had a little bit of a rough summer after what was a very, very promising spring. So, not the most difficult jungle matchup in the world for him to take. As for Dignitas, like I said, Spawn was really good. So was JJ. You put Spawn on the Twitch, he's going to do really well. He actually had a really good game on the Callista, but it was the Twitch game in Game 2 that was really phenomenal. He was a big reason they were in that game pretty much at all. He was, I want to say, like, almost all of their kills, like all but 2 or 3 of their kills in Game 2 here on the Twitch, and he showed it. He was really, really phenomenal. He's been phenomenal all year long. He's someone who has been pushing for a call-up for quite a while, and actually, no spoiler alert, because obviously I'm a week behind here on Academy stuff, but he does end up getting it. He is going to be called up for this week's games, as of right now, as of the time you're watching this video, so yeah, that's exciting to see, but for now, as we're talking about this week, he's still in Academy. He was really good. Hoon was not. This is like I said, my first real exposure to Hoon, and he's going to be my dud of the series here. he wasn't super strong in this one. The Gnar game in game 1 was fine into the Yone. I think that's a relatively good matchup for Gnar. But he goes very aggressive on the Akali pick in game 2 and gets very much punished for it. Just gets completely outplayed by Dokla, who, yes, we know Dokla is an LCS level top laner. He's not even like he's a mid-tier LCS level top laner. And, you know, to go up against him in your first Academy game, that's a little bit rough. But at the same time, you know, he still was the worst player on the Rift, in my opinion, in this series. I think Insanity definitely had some bad moments as well, especially in that game 1, like I said, on the Kog'Maw. You have to play that pick a little bit more careful, and the AP Cog just wasn't doing nearly the damage that they wanted him to, but for me, Hoon was a pretty easy choice for Dead of the series. But outlook-wise, these two teams I thought were relatively in a similar boat going into this, but CLG definitely looks like to be a little bit of a better team. Not to say they're, like, definitively better, because like I said, I still think there's a chance that Spawn, outside of Dokla, of course, is the best player in this series, but, you know, as a team, I think CLG probably proved here that they're just a tad bit more experienced and probably should be a little bit higher up on the power rankings than Dignitas. Moving on to the second series here of day 1, we had Immortals Academy taking on Cloud9 Academy. Another battle between two teams that I think are very, very comparable, at least in terms of skill level, or at least that's what they've shown up to this point, but Cloud9 just leaps and bounds ahead of them in this game, or in this series in both of these games, really, especially Game 2. Game 1, I think you could definitely show that there were some plays that went Cloud9's way that I think if they didn't, you know, maybe the game was a little more interesting, but Game 2 was just all C9 all the time from moment 1. And I think a big reason that a lot of the series was so Cloud9 favored, at least in the end, was how well Sheedon actually played. And he's been really impressive to me so far in summer. Obviously, Sheedon was somebody who we've known about for a very long time in terms of the NA solo queue, you know, kind of amateur scene. There were definitely some mental question marks with him heading into Academy, being picked up here by Cloud9, obviously an organization as big as Cloud9 and as successful with developing Academy talent as Cloud9. Picking him up, I think, is a pretty good sign. He comes in here, he's arguably been this team's best player so far this year. He's been really, really solid, and he was, again, in this series. The Poppy game, the Gragas game in game 1 was really, really, really good. It was pretty dominant, honestly, helped set up the Lucian for a lot. Obviously, Gragas Yasuo can be a really, really dangerous combo in the right circumstances, and it wasn't even the Yasuo that had to take over the game. It was just Gragas taking over the game, which is awesome. I mean, AP Gragas can do so much damage on his own, which I think a lot of people forget. And then Poppy, as we all know, I'm a huge fan of the Poppy pick here in game 2, and Sheedon did so much work on it. It was pretty much unstoppable. He was just really phenomenal. Big shout out here to King, who had one of his more consistent series, I'll say, of the year so far. 2 games of Lucian here. I think that's good for King. He's someone who I think has typically struggled with consistency. He has a lot of really high highs, which we've seen over the past, 2 years really consistently. There are times where he's just one of the best AD carries in Academy, and it looks like this guy's like a no-brainer LCS bot laner, and then there are times where he'll go a week and he'll just not be very good. This was a good series, so you know, this was part of the good part of King. Hopefully he can maintain that for a little longer. And then big shout out to Copy, who I thought had a really good game too here on the Silas as well. So definitely shout out to him. Really, really solid there. As for Immortals, not the best series in the world, but not the worst. My dud of the series is going to go to Pretty. I actually think Pretty has had a relatively good year so far. Him and Joey, I think, have been pretty strong players for Immortals overall. It's definitely been the top side of Immortals that has struggled for them. Vital and Chad, more specifically, that have been a little bit of an issue for this team. But Pretty was not so good in either of the games here. His LeBlanc game in game 1 was just outclassed, I think, by the Gragas. Usually as a LeBlanc, you should be able to outplay a lot of those engages, but he just wasn't able to do that. And then in game 2 on the Seraphine, he was just dying on repeat. He really accomplished absolutely nothing. I think you could give this to Vital as well in the top lane, who had an absolutely miserable game 2 here on the Sejuani. Really about as bad of a game 2 as you could possibly have. But at the same time, he had a relatively better game 1 here on the Olaf than Pretty did. So for me, Pretty having 2 bad games, Vital only having 1, it's a pretty easy choice to make. But outlook-wise for these two teams, Cloud9 was clearly better than them here. And I think Immortals Academy has really only gotten worse as the split has gone on. They were, in my opinion, one of the better teams at the beginning of spring. And then, ever since Proving Ground spring, I think this team has just kind of lost confidence and gotten worse and worse and worse and worse. So I don't know exactly what the problem is. I don't know where to fix it. Really, it does feel like everybody on this team just quite isn't playing up to snuff, but they're just not the top 2 to 3 team that they were in spring in terms of Academy power rankings. And then for C9, like, they're a good team. I don't know if they're a great team, because they definitely still have a lot of inconsistencies. Like I said, Team Liquid and 100 Thieves are at the top of that totem pole, and it's going to be really hard to dethrone them. But Cloud9, a really solid 2-0 win here that I think is going to put a lot of confidence in their basket of like how close they are to that top 2 as opposed to the rest of the crowd. Moving on to the third series here of day 1, we had Evil Geniuses Academy taking on 100 Thieves Academy. Definitely 2 teams that have been on a little bit of a different wavelength so far this year in terms of EG versus 100 Thieves, but they actually split 1-1, which I think EG is going to be very excited about, although maybe not with how it actually played out, as they were the dominant team in both games here. They really should have won game 1. They kind of threw that one away late here with some bad positioning and some bad team fights, but game 2 was really all EG all the time, and that's definitely a positive for a team that I think has definitely looked relatively lost at points throughout the season here. They were willing to run back the draft, which I think was a huge plus, and they were willing to run it back, I think, because of how well a lot of their laners did in the 1v1s or the 2v2s, most specifically this bottom lane, which just looked really, really good. They looked much better than 100 Thieves, which, of course, we know 100 Thieves' bot lane has kind of been their weakness so far this year, so EG felt like they could capitalize on that, and they absolutely did. Kaori is going to be my player of the series here. He was really, really good. He continues to be really, really good here in Academy. Obviously, relatively up and down. I think sometimes when this team is losing, he can try to win too hard, which is kind of what we actually saw in game 1, where the game was starting to slowly slip out of their hands, and he was attempting to make a lot of plays that I think probably shouldn't have as the AD carry, as a Kalista in particular, and was just dying a lot for no reason. And I think a big reason that they lost that game was actually Kaori's inability to maintain being the hyper carry on that team, because he was the one with all the gold. Obviously, him and Surdy in the top lane on the Jace, who had a really good one as well. But at the end of the day, he comes back in game 2 and absolutely obliterates 100 Thieves again. So 2 really, really phenomenal early games here from Kaori, and even though he played a little bit poorly, I'd say at the back half of that game 1, he still deserves that player of the series. But like I said, Surdy also with a really, really good series here. The Jace game in game 1, he was doing absolutely boatloads of damage. He goes the Shyvana in game 2, builds the Demonic, and is doing damage as well. Isn't quite as tanky. Was definitely going to get worried about that if this game went a little bit longer with the Gangplank, but it didn't. This game only went 28 minutes. They were so far ahead that he felt he could build the Demonic, and there really wasn't a lot they could do about it, and he was right. So shout out to him there. Those 2 players, I think, on EG were probably the 2 most impactful. For 100 Thieves, I think they had a couple of players that played relatively well. In game 1, I really thought Tenacity had a pretty good one here on the Fiora, and especially I thought Busio towards the end of that game was a big reason they were able to win it at all on the Zilean. It's a pick that we really don't see a lot of people pulling out just in general, but when it is pulled out and when it does work, it works really well, which we saw there in that game 1. But my dud of the series here is going to go to BMFX. Again, I've talked about this throughout the year so far. He's definitely, you know, as someone who's been called up and is kind of new to Academy on a team that wants to be on the upper echelons, the top tier of Academy teams, it's definitely, like, you want to see him be a little bit more ready than he is right now, but he's definitely been a little bit of a weak link for this 100 Thieves bot lane, or this 100 Thieves Academy team just in general. He's grown throughout the split. I talked about that last week, but not enough. Just unfortunately right now, it's just not been enough for him to be not a liability for this team when playing other teams, which we saw here when you have a good bot lane, even if the rest of the team is a little bit outclassed, you know, Will versus Tomio or Jimmy versus Saligo. Like, these are all relatively even matchups, but Kaori is just better than BMFX, and we saw that throughout the series pretty heavily. So BMFX is going to get my dud of the series here. I will say Will had a really rough one here in game 2 as well. Will is someone who I've hyped up a lot. In my opinion, he is like Kenvi, but I think there's a chance he's even better, which is what we saw with we saw him on Dignitas Academy last year. He comes over here to 100 Thieves Academy, and he's been really phenomenal to start the year off. A little bit more up and down, I think, than Kenvi was. This was a pretty bad game here in game 2 on the Trundle, but at the same time, he's still a good player. He had a good game 1 here. Another reason why they were able to win were those engages late game, but yeah, outlook-wise, 100 Thieves still wants to be one of the best teams in Academy. This is definitely not the best split that they could have had. especially considering this could have very, very easily been an 0-2 for them. I think they're lucky to walk out of this with a win. They definitely, like I said, still have some things to work out, but at the end of the day, they're still really, really talented. I'm not going to just sit here and be like, this is complete panic mode. This is a very good win for EG, though. This is a team that I think a lot of people are waiting on them to perform up to their talent level, right? Saligo's been one of the best mids in Academy for a long time. Kaori's very good. Smoothie is very good. Surdy and Tomio, what am I talking about, have definitely been question marks for this team, but Surdy had a phenomenal series here, and Tomio does continue to grow, so if this team can continue to improve in the same way that they have for quite a while, hopefully they can make their way up out of, I'd say, like the bottom three that they've kind of been in the past few weeks to more of that middle pack that I think a lot of the other teams are clumped in. Moving on to the fourth series here of day one, we had Team Liquid Academy taking on Golden Guardians Academy. Some changes here for GGA. Obviously, they've had a little bit of a rough start to the year. Definitely not the one that they wanted here. And they've made some changes. Obviously, TSM, as I've talked about on this channel already, made some pretty major roster changes to their main roster. One of those was acquiring Chime here from Golden Guardians Academy. So Chime is out at support. Obviously, Choose has been playing here in the mid lane as they have waited for Leader to come in. Leader is still not here yet, so Ryoma seems to be the one that is filling in now after Jake's Kittens, which of course, I don't really want to, I hate talking about that name, but they disbanded the past week, and Ryoma and Prismal come to play here for Golden Guardians Academy. It looks like Prismal will be taking over full-time at support here. Obviously, he role swapped for Amateur at the beginning of the year, and obviously he was the AD carry for this Golden Guardians Academy team for quite a while, as well as for CLG Academy, 100 Thieves Academy. He's definitely had some experience here in the Academy circuit. He's been one of the best players in Academy for a very long time, someone who's deserved an LCS call-up, but he role swaps here to support. It looks like he'll be filling in. Ryoma looks like he'll be filling in while Leader is away. Yeah, those are the roster changes to go over, but let's talk about the games here. Golden Guardians takes game one in a pretty fun one here. Concept was actually really, really phenomenal here in this game one, this Nasus pick. Obviously, we know Concept to be someone who just doesn't play meta, which is awesome. I think that's a great thing, right? The Mundos, the Malphites, the Nasus, the Trundle, as we see here in the game two. Shout out Concept. He isn't really bothered by what is popular or what is, quote-unquote strong in the meta right now. He's going to play what he feels is best in the matchup, and he does that here in game one with the Nasus, and he really is able to take over the game, able to win it pretty easily. Prismal has a really good one here on the Tom Kench as well, just pretty much everywhere, all over the map. Really big shout out to both Concept and Prismal, as they were the two MVPs of game one. And then game two was pretty much the opposite story. Hyeri was everywhere here on the Akali, was just able to take over the game and kill pretty much everybody who needed it. Ayla had a good one here on the Karma. Armeo and Bradley and Yeon, everybody else stepped up after having relatively bad game ones, and Concept goes from being the hero in game one to being vilified here in game two. An awful, awful, awful game of Trundle in game two. There's really no other way to put it. In fact, Concept was so bad that even though he was my player of the game in game one, he's going to get my dud of the series here, because his game two was easily the worst game that anybody had in the series. I think you could realistically give this to Armeo as well for that Volibear game in game one, but he really turned it around in game two. I thought his game two was a lot better. He was able to get ahead on Volibear, which you absolutely need. Obviously, going into Gragas instead of Wukong is a much easier matchup, so definitely something worth bringing out there. But my player of the series is going to go to Hyeri. Even in the game one, he was the shining light, the bright spot here for Team Liquid on the Yone. He was really, really solid for them. He was a big reason they were in that game in the first place, and then he was doing so much damage on the Akali in game two. He very, very, very much deserves player of the series. He continues to grow and get better. Yeon, after having a really rough game one, I thought also had a very good game two here on the Ezreal, a pick that obviously he is very, very well known for. I think the Ezreal and the Zarya are the two picks that so far in 2022, Yeon's probably had the most success on. And obviously Yeon and Ayla, you could argue, are the two best players in Academy, full stop. So, a rough 1-1 here, I'll say, for both teams. Golden Guardians obviously doesn't want to get completely blown out, but Team Liquid doesn't want to be losing a game to Golden Guardians. Like, that's really how it is. You could argue that GG has been the worst team in Academy so far this year. Obviously, TSM would argue that for you as well, but and you could argue Team Liquid has easily been the best. And it's a little bit rough to see them split here, especially if you're Team Liquid. But you're going to be happy that you were able to at least pull out Game 2. Game 1, maybe it was just a little bit of a surprise when it came to draft. You weren't expecting the Nasus, you weren't expecting the Senna, and this hyper late game that Golden Guardians was able to build here with Azir and Senna and Nasus, and at that point you reach that, you're going to lose. So maybe you just weren't expecting it. You bounce back here in Game 2 with a much better strategy. You ban out the Nasus, you ban out the Wukong, you ban out the Kayle. You're able to do a lot more here, and I definitely think it helped them out. But outlook-wise, TL's not going to be super happy losing this, but at the end of the day, they're still a really good team, and they proved it here. Hyeri still proves that he's one of the best mids in Academy. Yeon and Ayla, even with a rough Game 1, I think still proved that they're one of the better bot lanes in Academy, especially in this Game 2, Ayla in particular. And then for GG, honestly, I think this is a relatively good showing with a new roster. Concept dominating in Game 1 only to run it down in Game 2 is pretty on brand for them. But Ryoma here, Prismal here, I definitely think this is an upgrade to what they've been playing throughout the year, even if, Prismal versus Chime, I think that's relatively a push. To me, Ryoma's a gigantic upgrade to Choose, who obviously has been a coach for them most of the year, but has been filling the shoes for Leader until he gets in. Ryoma's definitely a huge upgrade to that. Ryoma, I think, and Leader, I think they give you relatively similar things here, so this should prepare them well for whenever Leader actually comes in. And, taking a game off of Team Liquid, they're going to be very happy about that, I think. Moving on to the final series here of Day 1, we had TSM Academy taking on FlyQuest Academy. Very interesting series here that I think a lot of people were very intrigued to watch because this is the new TSM Academy lineup. Of course, we're looking at Solo in the top lane, Anda in the jungle, Takeover still here in the mid, and then Tactical and Mia down from the main roster here, as TSM's main roster has done a lot of different shakeups, a lot of different moves. This is the outcome for the Academy team, and I actually think this is probably going to be a little bit of an upgrade for Academy, at least in terms of how they currently play. And obviously coming in as Hyper's replacement, Hyper not getting called up anywhere. I believe they just wanted to swap out junglers here. I've been pretty vocal on this channel about how I don't think Hyper is quite the answer here for TSM. His Lee Sin looks good, his not much else looks good, so they bring Anda in here as an experienced, long-time jungler here in North America to give them a little bit more stability. You bring Solo in the top lane here as you promote Sol up to LCS. I think there's a real chance that Solo is just better than Sol is right now. Obviously, I'm not 100% sure about that. I think Sol has been all right. We haven't seen Solo in quite a while, at least on the Academy stage, but at the same time, Solo is somebody who I think over the years has been incredibly disrespected in terms of his role in the NA ecosystem. I still think he has the opportunity to be one of the top 5 to 7 top laners in North America right now, and I think he's been that for quite a long time, but unfortunately not a lot of people want to give him that opportunity. Very similar player to, I think, how a lot of people view Dokla for a long time, but Dokla's finally, I think, getting his respect up in the LCS. And then Tactical and Mia getting swapped down here. I think a lot of the reasons Tactical is getting swapped down here is ideally, at least in TSM's eyes, he needs to rebuild his confidence, because I don't really think they see a world in which Instinct is going to be better than Tactical, at least I don't. And I think they want Tactical to come down here and just absolutely stomp and hopefully get him back up on the main roster sooner rather than later. And that's exactly what I think happened here for TSM, is Tactical stomped. And hopefully that's a good sign for them. He's going to be my player of the series here. Was really phenomenal on 2 games of Lucian, which, shout out. Lucian takes a lot of prio to make work, I think, in the meta right now. Not so much into Aphelios. I think you can pretty much body Aphelios as Lucian if you're good enough. But the Ezreal Yuumi lane, I think, is relatively skill matchup here for Lucian Nami, especially if you don't get a ludicrous amount of jungle attention. But Tactical was able to do that. He just obliterated them early and late game. He did so much damage on this Lucian. Mia did a really good job supporting him here on the Nami. I actually really like how both of them played. They were the 2 best players in this series. Takeover also had a really good one, though. Big shout out to him for the Azir game in Game 1. If he had a more dynamic Zoe game in Game 2, there's a real chance that he would have been my player of the series here. He was probably my player of the game in Game 1, but the Zoe game was fine. But the Azir game in Game 1 was just really, really, really fun to watch. Solo was fine. Up in the top lane, a 0-0 and 8 Ornn game in Game 1, and then a fine Aatrox game. Really not much to talk about. Honestly, TSM was just kind of clicking on all cylinders in this one. They were just the better team by far. As for FlyQuest, this is a team that obviously started out the season really hot, and has since slowly but surely come back down to earth, I think, a little bit. I think a lot of that has been Yuji, who had a really phenomenal start to the year here, especially the first couple weeks in Academy, but has really kind of settled back into what I think he was a lot of spring, which is just kind of a mediocre to lower, like a lower to mid Academy jungler. Not to say a bad player, but just someone who's not quite on the level of being able to carry an Academy team to a high ranking. Obviously, the player that I think has surprised the most for FlyQuest Academy this split has been Spirax, who has been actually really, really good in the mid lane for this team for most of the year. He was fine in this one. He was not so great in Game 2 on the Azir as he was. He was doing quite a bit of damage in Game 1 on the Corki, but just wasn't able to actually get a win off of it. Tomo and Diamond continue to be a little bit of a disappointment, but at the end of the day, like, TSM was just a better team here. Going up against Tactical and Mia is a pretty big challenge. They are an LCS caliber bot lane, whether or not they've shown it this year or not. Obviously, Tactical is somebody who's been to Worlds. Mia is somebody who I think has shown a lot of potential, so yeah, I mean, losing to them I don't think is like a complete disaster, but outlook-wise, like, FlyQuest is fine. I really do think they're towards the bottom, like not at the bottom, but like close to or near the bottom of that like middle cluster of teams. You know, your C9s, your Immortals, your Dignitas, like all these teams that are just like right there in that same cluster. FlyQuest is right with them, but I'm just not sure I would believe that they're better than any of those teams right now, especially after a pretty convincing 2-0 loss here. TSM Academy, however, in my opinion, has gotten better this week, and I think they will continue to get better. They were I think I had them as the worst ranked Academy team last week. That will not be true anymore with this roster. This roster has been upgraded immensely. Whether or not that's beneficial or not to their main roster, obviously we'll have to see, but this roster has been upgraded immensely, and I think it should very much help their position in Academy, so we'll definitely see that. If Tactical continues to play like this, if Mia continues to play like this, this team is going to be kind of scary, actually, when it comes to Proving Grounds, so that'll definitely be something interesting to watch and wait for. I don't know if, you know, they continue to play like this, if they'll be down here forever, but right now it's pretty fun to watch. Moving on now to Day 2 of Week 5 NA Academy action, and Day 2 was kicked off with a series between Evil Geniuses Academy and Dignitas Academy. I think two teams that I think are relatively similar in skill level, definitely not in performance so far this year, though, and that definitely shows here in this series as Dignitas takes the 2-0 series win here off the back of what continues to just be a phenomenal bot lane. Like, there's really no other way to put it. Spawn and JJ are LCS caliber. They are LCS ready. They are really, really, really good. Spawn continues to just not die. Like, he plays so aggressive and it doesn't matter. He just never gets caught because he's just better, I think, than pretty much everybody he goes against. Not to say that Kaori is a bad player. In fact, I was hyping him up earlier in the week, but just Spawn is so good. Like, or at least he's been playing so well right now. Like, the improvement that he has made has been ginormous. He's going to be my player of the series here. He was really, really good, although I was very, very close to giving this to JJ as well, who had a really good one in this as well. He has also had a pretty phenomenal summer so far. I think he's been a little overshadowed by how good Spawn has been, but I think really the best bot lanes are always a duo, and right now Spawn and JJ very much feel like a duo. They very much feel like they have a ton of great inbuilt synergy between these two players, and I think it's really helped this Dignitas team like explode into being one of the more surprisingly good teams in Academy so far this year. Insanity had a really good series here as well. This is someone who I think has been up and down so far in summer for Dignitas Academy, but he had a very good game 2 here on the Swain. Definitely excited to see that. Hoon continues to be a little bit of a question mark. He did not have a very good Jace game in Game 1 going up against Surdy's Gnar. Surdy actually abused him pretty hard in that game. He got a pretty huge lead. Just Surdy wasn't able to actually transition that because of how ahead Spawn was on the Ezreal, and the Rakan was just a huge issue for the Gnar in general. But yeah, honestly, like, this game was really, like, the series was really, really dictated by how good Dignitas' bot lane was. As for Evil Geniuses, I guess you could say the opposite was true, right? This series was dictated by the fact that Dignitas' bot lane was just able to beat theirs so convincingly. Smoothie's going to be my dud of the series here. I actually think that Smoothie has had a very underratedly good year so far on Evil Geniuses Academy. He's been someone who I think a lot of people would, you see him in Academy and you're like, oh, if he's not the best support, then he's doing something wrong. Obviously, this is a, former Cloud9 support, former Echo Fox guy. He's been to Worlds, like, long time, player in LCS. Like, if he's not one of the top players in Academy, he's doing it wrong. But I think he's exactly where he should be right now after last year's performance. He's one of the top supports in Academy. And unfortunately, here he just kind of got outplayed by the other top players in Academy here in Spawn and JJ. So obviously, Yeon and Ayla are right up there as well. But you could make a real argument that those are the 3 best bot lanes in Academy right now, or at least they have been so far this year. And unfortunately for EG, they just couldn't pull out in this one. They couldn't pull out a win. They couldn't pull out a performance to show up Spawn and JJ in this one. But they certainly weren't the only negative parts of this team. I don't think Sligo had a very good series here. He's continued, I think, to be really disappointing so far in summer. Significantly more disappointing than this bot lane has been. Sligo, to me, has been someone who has been a really strong performer in Academy for many, many, many years now, and he just really hasn't shown up so far this year. I think maybe he's just getting a little bit tired of being in this system. His game 2 here against Insanity on the Ahri was just not very good. The bright spot for them was definitely Surdy, as he was earlier this week as well. He had a very good series. This is someone who's been very up and down so far this year, but he dominated Hoon in game 1 here on the Gnar, and he had a little bit of a worse game in game 2, but at the same time, still, that game 1 was really, really, really impressive. It was a very big reason they were in that game, really at all. It was him versus the world, so definitely fun to watch Surdy kind of come into his own in the last couple series here. Definitely something that I think Evil Geniuses fans are going to want to watch out for, but as outlook-wise, EG's fine. They're not a great team. They're not a bad team. I kind of feel the same for Dignitas. They're going to be very happy to win here. Obviously, I talked about this earlier, and we'll get into this after the next series as well, but Spawn's not going to be in Academy much longer. I'm not sure what this team is going to look like without Spawn here, because he really is the focal point of everything that this Dignitas Academy team wants to do right now, but as he is here right now, this team is dangerous because they can just play through him and dominate. Very similar to what we're seeing a lot in the LCK right now, where if you just get that bot laner that you know is better and good with resources and can team fight and will win you games if you get them there, you can win a lot of games, and that's what we're seeing from Dignitas Academy. We'll have to see what happens to them once they have to switch up their strategy a little bit with the new roster. Moving on to the second series here of day 2, we had TSM Academy taking on Team Liquid Academy in a series that I think a lot of people were interested in watching and very much stopped being interested in as soon as the game started, because holy shit, this was not close at all. I will get to TSM later because there are certainly some things I want to say, but let's talk about just how freaking good Team Liquid Academy is, and just how good this team has been for so long. The bottom 3 members of this team on the scoreboard here are just so much better than Academy deserves right now, especially Yeon and Ayla. And we've talked about this, we know Yeon and Ayla are so good, right? They specifically chose to stay on Team Liquid because they wanted to learn from Core JJ. They wanted to learn from Han Sama. They wanted to make sure that they got a good opportunity in LCS. And yeah, I get it, this is a prime example of why, is because you look at someone like Tactical who goes to a bad situation and immediately goes from a good AD carry to a bad one. Situation matters a lot for AD carries in particular and bot lanes in particular, but even for all players. All players' situation just matters. Look at Kenvi on Immortals right now. I think it's a great example. But this bot lane is just so freaking good. At their best, I think right now they're a top 4 to 5 bot lane in North America. I think they're better than most LCS bot lanes. And they show that pretty consistently on a week-to-week basis. My player of the series here is going to be Ayla. You could give it to Yeon. That would be fine too, but I thought Ayla was just so ridiculously dominant in this series. That Amumu game in game 1 was disgusting. I've always talked about how Amumu can be a pretty feast or famine pick on this channel. But when you feast, I mean, you feast. Those engages, Aphelios was done. There was absolutely nothing he could do in that game. Really, really disgusting to watch. Not to say that anybody else on the team was much better, but just, holy shit. Not a fun series to play against if you're TSM, just in general. Yeon was awesome here, especially on the Kalista in game 1, but even on the Aphelios in game 2 was just really, really good. Hyeri did so much damage in this series. The Cassio in game 1, we've barely seen any Cass in this year so far. It's really good to see her getting picked again. You can see the Malphite off of Bradley here in the top lane in game 2. That was fun. Bradley does 1 million damage on Gangplank. That was fun. Just overall a Team Liquid series that I think is like it very much felt like them versus whoever. Like they could do whatever they wanted. They weren't actually playing against competition. They just did whatever the hell they wanted to do all series long. That's exactly what Team Liquid did here. As for TSM, I'm gonna start talking about this, and it's gonna piss people off, and I know that because you look at any post-game Reddit thread for this team, you look at any sort of Twitter comment, you go into any sort of Discord server, and you're going to start to see some bullshit. And I don't usually like to bring this kind of stuff up, but you're going to start to see some bullshit revisionist history that like, oh, Tactical was never good. Solo was never good. Mia has no potential. Like, okay, let's set one thing straight. All right, if the words Tactical was never good, Tactical was never a good LCS AD carry come out of your mouth, I don't want to hear your analysis. Like, I don't know what to tell you. I really, really don't, because that is some revisionist history bullshit. Not even just performance-wise. Not even just like, oh, Tactical was on a good team, so he looked good. If that were the case, I would understand, right? If it really felt like Tactical was like, oh, he never really had these outstanding plays. He was just always in the right position and never made mistakes, right? That's not even the truth. Like, Tactical on Team Liquid in those playoff series, I remember him actively 1v4ing teams in the playoffs. So let's not sit here and pretend like this argument of Tactical was never good has any sort of legs, and that anybody who spits that at you has any idea what they're talking about. Let's start talking about how he has lost every bit of confidence that he has ever had. Tactical is one of the more mechanically talented AD carries that I have watched play in a very long time, and he does not trust himself right now. He does not trust himself to make those plays, and so where he is at is he's getting caught in between a lot, and we saw that especially in Game 1 here on the Aphelios, where he doesn't know if he can push up. He doesn't know if he can be aggressive, so he's not making plays. And then when he finally decides to do something, Ayla shows up and obliterates him for it. And what is he going to do? He's just going to melt down, right? I'm not saying that he's having some sort of mental breakdown in real life right now. I don't know what he's going, I don't know him personally or anything like that. But on the Rift, like, this is a player who has no confidence and has no concept of being able to make those decisions for himself. And that's really sad to see. He is going to get my dud of the series here because he was the worst player here, but we know he can be better than this. Hell, he was dominant earlier this week against FlyQuest. He was absolutely obliterating Tomo and Diamond, and so we know that he can be that player. Yeon and Ayla is a pretty tough duo to go up against, especially in your first week of Academy, but I have faith the Tactical will turn it around. I'm not saying it's guaranteed to happen or anything like that, but we know he has the talent to do it. He just has to get out of his own head. As for the outlooks of these two teams, TSM Academy continues to be an enigma, a mystery. I do think they're better than they were last week, but they're probably still not the team that everybody thinks they're going to be. Team Liquid is the best team in Academy. There's really no other way to put it. They have been all year long. They will continue to be all year long. They're the best team in Academy. Losing one game randomly here to Golden Guardians isn't going to change my mind on that. So that's the outlook there. Just stop with all of this weird talk, man. Like, I don't understand it. Moving on to our third series here of Day 2, we had Golden Guardians Academy taking on Cloud9 Academy here. A C9 2-0 win here for that team. They continue to roll. It's 4-0 in the week so far. They're definitely going to be excited about that. Off of the back of their solo laners really stepping up and really being key for this team. Obviously, I've talked a lot this year about how Sheedon has kind of been the pace setter for Cloud9, and then King and Destiny, whether or not they're on or off, have kind of determined whether or not this team is winning or losing. But in this one, really, it was the solo laners, who I think have kind of been a little bit quieter for Cloud9 so far, at least in summer. And that's a good thing to see, especially Darshan showing up and absolutely blowing people away on that Aurelia, doing a billion damage in that game too. I was very close to giving Darshan the player of the series here, but for me, it is going to go to Copy. A lot of people, I think, disagree with me on my Copy opinion. I've talked about this quite a bit. I think a lot of people are a lot higher on him than I am. I think he's fine. He's a good player. I certainly don't think he's like an unbelievable player, if I'm being honest. A lot of people want to see him over Jensen, or want to see him like in the LCS, and a lot of people want to talk about him as one of the best Academy mid laners, and I think in a general sense he is, but in terms of like, I don't think he's number 1 or number 2. I think he's probably closer to 4 than he is to 1. You know what I mean? And that's not to take away from Copy. I do think there are a lot of good mid laners in Academy right now, but he certainly has his ups and downs, and there are a lot of times where I think he just doesn't show up. He was really good in this one, 2 games of Talia, especially in my opinion, the game 1. I thought he was really taking over the map in a really good way there, but yeah, honestly, WoW Copy's really, 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 really good. I'm not sure if he's quite on that same level as someone like Hyeri is on Team Liquid, or even someone like for a long time I would have said Pretty on Immortals. I think is someone who I think probably has a little bit. I get that Pretty's an import, but someone who I think is a little more ready right now. But that's not to say Copy's super far behind any of them. Just that it's definitely something worth considering. As for the rest of this team, they were all fine. Like I said, Darshan and Copy were really the main carries here, but King and Destiny had a really good time in the bottom lane. Sheedon was still, effectively taking over the map on his Graves and his Udyr, his two most famous picks, so happy to see that. As for Golden Guardians, they're not very good. It's not really a big surprise to see them lose here. Ryoma is going to be my dud of the series here coming in. Hasn't really been a huge upgrade to Choose so far. Obviously, we know he's better, or at least theoretically he should be better than Choose, because Ryoma is a better player. But Prismal is also coming in not really... He's been a pretty big downgrade to Chime so far, and it's not that, the team already wasn't playing particularly phenomenal. Array continues to just be there. Like, I feel like I've said Array's name so little so far this year for Golden Guardians, and that's definitely something worth noting, and Concept and Acadian continue to not be positives for Golden Guardians, so they definitely aren't the most inspiring of Academy teams, but at the end of the day, it's Academy. You're here to develop the players. You're hoping players like Array and Concept can develop. Those are the two that you're really looking for here. Everybody else is just kind of there to facilitate it, but outlook-wise for Golden Guardians, they're not super good. Like, I don't want to go too in-depth on it. I don't want to waste anybody's time, but they're not very good. They're not a very good team. And they're going to continue to not be a very good team, even when Leader comes. I don't think it's really going to change that much. For Cloud9, they continue to be good. They're getting closer to that upper echelon, that top tier, than I think the mid tier. Right now, they're really starting to show that consistency. Yes, they've played Golden Guardians Academy and Immortals, who are kind of on the downswing this week, but, at the end of the day, wins are wins. And going 4-0 so far, obviously we have another day to talk about, but going 4-0 so far is definitely a positive. If the soul laners can continue to develop, obviously Sheedon's playing well, King and Destiny are starting to play well. I think this team can definitely be one of the top teams in Academy, but obviously they're going to have to start beating the top teams in Academy for me to really, really start to fully believe in that. Moving on to our 4th series here of Day 2, we had 100 Thieves Academy taking on FlyQuest Academy. 2-0 series win here for Thieves. Wow, I mean, this was, it almost felt like a BM series. Like, I really had no other way to describe it. 100 Thieves had this one in control from moment 1, and they continued to push onward. This was a very aggressive series from them, and they showed that they really have some tricks up their sleeve. Obviously, we've seen this set of Yasuo bot lane before, but we don't really see it much in Academy, and we certainly don't see it with so few knockups. Really, it's just the Wukong here, and then obviously, Yasuo can do shit. But, like, outside of that, like, there wasn't a lot of actual support for this draft in game 1, and Busio dominated on this. He was so scary on this Yasuo. He's easily going to get my player of the series, pretty much specifically for that Yasuo game in game 1. He was good in game 2 on the Tahm Kench, don't get me wrong. He was affecting the entire map quite a bit. But my game 2 player of the game probably would have gone to Will, who was really, really solid on that Lee Sin. But that Busio game in game 1 was really, really disgusting. And it was really a trendsetter. Obviously, Diamond called out Busio. He went for a little bit of the flame tactics, went for the trash talk, and it backfired. It very much backfired here as Busio clapped him on that Yasuo in game 1. But like I said, Will had a really good series here as well. He had a very fun game 1 here on the Wukong, was just kind of everywhere, helping out that Yasuo a lot. And then in game 2, he was phenomenal on the Lee Sin. Like, really just a masterclass on how to take over the map and how to play aggressive early and maintain that and translate that into objectives and a gigantic gold lead for this team. So, big shout out to Will. Really, really good series from him. Those are the two members that I think impressed the most for me, but everybody on this team played well. Jimmy had a really fun Game 1 here on the Sylas was able to get a lot done. Tenacity and Nakumo had some fun lane matchups here. That Gangplank and a Tryndamere, like, lane matchup in general is really fun to watch and really fun to play out. So a lot of interesting stuff there for 100 Thieves, but at the end of the day, this was all about Busio and all about that Yasuo. And then for FlyQuest, they weren't up for it today. They weren't quite on the ball is what I'll say. Obviously, Diamond calling out Busio and then just getting obliterated by the Yasuo in game 1 here with the Zeri Gragas, which is such a bold lane to pick into set of Yasuo. They get obliterated, they get punished for it, and Diamond looks bad in game 1. He continues to not look great in game 2, although I will argue that it was much better than game 1 here on the Karma. Game 2 was much more of a jungle diff, in my opinion, with Yuji really struggling to play against Will. Yuji has continued to kind of settle back into that lower mid-tier. Like I said earlier this week, jungle position kind of getting out-pathed and out-roamed here, out-macroed, I should say. I was looking for the word and I found it, by a lot of the better junglers in the region. But at the end of the day, that's what FlyQuest Academy seems to be, is they're just kind of a meh team. Like, they're not great, they're not bad, they're just kind of there, right? And, the early season kind of hot streak that they went on certainly doesn't seem like it's a herald of more impressive things to come for them. It very much seems like that was an outlier, and now that I think a lot of the other teams have kind of gotten their shit together, they've kind of fallen back down to earth a little bit. So outlook-wise, I expect to see FlyQuest, yes, still near the middle of the table, but probably near the bottom of the middle. 100 Thieves are right up there. Like I said, I don't know if they're quite on that same level of Team Liquid, just because TL is, like, really freaking good right now, but they're probably number 2. They're probably the clear-cut number 2, in my opinion. If they can figure out BMFX, everybody else in this team is playing phenomenally. Cloud9's probably getting closer to that conversation as well, but 100 Thieves, I think, has a strong stake at number 2 right now, and this series, I think, shows a lot why. Moving on to the 5th and final game here of day 2, we had Immortals Academy taking on CLG, Counterlogic Gaming Academy, and it's a 2-0 series win here for CLG as they continue their upward climb, their active momentum, kind of getting back to the form that we saw from them in spring and not in Proving Grounds, because this team had so much momentum and they had so much confidence, and really I think a lot of that fell away over the course of Proving Grounds as they just couldn't get the job done. They replaced a lot of their roster here. Jenkins is in, Kevy is in, Meech is in. And they're starting slowly, I think, to get back a lot of that confidence, especially Triple, who I think is really, he started the year being very questionable, I think, for the CLG team, definitely having his ups and downs. Over the past few weeks, he has been one of the best mid laners in Academy, pretty much no question. He was really phenomenal in this series. That Talia game in game 1 is one of the best games of Talia I've seen in a very, very long time. He's easily going to get my player of the series here for CLG Academy. He was really, really awesome. He was still really good on the Azir in game 2, don't get me wrong. Obviously, the comp was a little more centered around Meech in game 2, but Triple was still phenomenal. I mean, that game 1 was just so disgusting to watch, and like I said, I think he's just been getting closer and closer back to that form that we all really were enjoying seeing him in spring, where he was one of the best mid laners in Academy. I think he's very much getting back to that. This team really feels a lot more cohesive. I was looking for the word there. Feels a lot more cohesive right now with Jenkins back in. I'm not sure if that's because they've maybe, scrimmed a little bit more with Jenkins, or, if Kevy's more comfortable there. But Kevy had a much better series here than I think he did in their earlier series this week. Jenkins back in here, obviously, for Dokla. And I actually thought he was good in the series as well. He wasn't never necessarily the focal point, but his game 1 on the Gnar, like, their ability to just obliterate Vital in that top lane on the Sejuani, like, it very much came into play. It was very much an active part of the game. And like I said, Meech and Breezy were a big part of the game too as well. Breezy, I thought, has been, like, the most stable member of CLG throughout the year so far. He's probably been their best player on Academy, or at least ever since summer started. And Meech, I thought, had one of his better performances of the year here on Twitch in game 2. He's someone who I definitely think has been up and down, very similar to BMFX on 100 Thieves Academy. But at the end of the day, both of them have very good teams around them, so sometimes they can hide their weaknesses, and hopefully they can grow and have more performances like this. As for Immortals Academy, they continue their descent. This is a team that was riding high in spring and has kind of done the opposite of what CLG is doing, which is start to plummet to the bottom. Vital continues to look like a weakness in the top lane. He's very clearly the dud of the series here. That game 1 on Sejuani was abysmally bad. One of the worst games that we've seen in Academy this year, in my opinion. Just very, very not good. And I think Chad continues to look like one of the worst junglers in Academy, which is definitely not what you wanted to see. Obviously, Chad was someone I had a lot of hype for. At least, I expected him to be better than, a lot of the junglers that he has not been able to beat, because he looked pretty good on 100 Thieves Academy when he was given the opportunity here, obviously coming out of that 100 Thieves system. But, at the end of the day, it looks like that system can really make or break you as a player sometimes, because he looked really good there. He comes over here to Immortals, which they're not that much worse of a team, but they are a little bit worse and definitely not the same kind of organization. And he doesn't look like even remotely the same kind of player that he was for that 100 Thieves team last year. So the bright spot for Immortals definitely has to be Pretty. He had a rough game 1 here, definitely got outplayed by Triple quite considerably in game 1, but he had a much better game 2 here on the Sylas. Definitely a pick that I think he is preferred. We've seen that over the years, that Sylas is definitely a pick he enjoys playing, and he actually was keeping them in the game for quite a bit of game 2 on that Sylas pick. So shout out to him there. Outside of that, outlook-wise for both of these teams, while CLG might be towards the top of that theoretical, mid-tier of teams, Immortals, I think, is slowly creeping their way down that list. Obviously, they've had a little bit of a tough week here, and they've had a couple of tough weeks in the past, but, that doesn't really explain away the fact that they're just not playing up to expectations right now. I think all their players, especially this bot lane, have really regressed over the course of summer, and hopefully they can figure that out. As for CLG, it really does feel like they're starting to finally find their groove here in Academy, and if they can continue on this pace, hopefully they can get back to that form where they, at one point in time, were considered, in my opinion, the best team in Academy last split. So hopefully they can get right back to that, because that would be good for everybody involved, in my opinion. Moving on to our third and final day of Week 5 NA Academy action here in summer. We kicked off Day 3 with Dignitas Academy taking on Cloud9 Academy. And Dig and C9 split this one, 1-1. Pretty close series, back and forth, I'd say. Both teams kind of showing advantages and showing weaknesses. Really, the advantages for both teams were very similar, though, because on Dignitas' side, you had Spawn and JJ continuing to be the focal point and the main winning point for Dig in their Game 1 win. And then for C9, you actually had King and Destiny have a really phenomenal Game 2 here. King with a really good game on Lucian to take Game 2. You could talk about who you want player of the series to be. For me, it's going to go to King on Cloud9. I thought the Game 2 was a little bit more impressive than Spawn's Game 1. It's really just one of those two. If you want to give it to Spawn for his Game 1 performance, great. If you want to give it to King for his Game 2 performance, great. You want to give it to Destiny or JJ as well? I understand that. I thought they probably had a little bit of worse losses than the 280 carries did, but at the end of the day, I'm going to give it to King because I thought he was really, really fun to watch in this one, and he continues to improve and to, have these games where sometimes he's really, really good. Sometimes he's not so good, but in this one he was really, really good. My dud of the series is actually going to go to a Cloud9 member as well, though. It's going to go to Copy here, who I talked about him earlier this week. A lot of people are really hyping him up as somebody that a lot of people want to see in LCS. I don't know if he's at that point, man. He had a couple games here. His Game 1 was not great here on the Swain. You just got to be better. And even his Game 2 here on the Victor, I was really hoping he was going to be able to do more. He was able to outplay Insanity, who had very much an up and down Game 2 here on the Lissandra. But at the end of the day, you just need to see more out of Copy. You need to see him be more aggressive, and you need to see him not have these games like he did here on Swain in Game 1, where he's essentially just non-existent. He's completely irrelevant. I think you could have given dud of the series here to Insanity for his Game 2, like I said on Lissandra. But at the end of the day, I thought Copy had 2 games where he was closer to irrelevant, and Insanity was actually pretty good in Game 1. So that's really the deciding factor there. Other players in this series who I thought played relatively okay. I thought Hoon actually had a pretty good one here. This is definitely his best series in Academy of the week. His Game 2 here on the Camille was definitely his best game that he's had in quite a while, even in their loss. He at least showed up and was able to, he was kind of the big driving force for Dignitas here in Game 2. And then I thought Sheedon, again, continues to have a good season and a good series here for Cloud9. He wasn't that great in Game 1 in their loss, but in Game 2 he was really important on that Viego to take over a lot of what that Cloud9 team wanted to do. So Big shout out there. Outlook-wise for these two teams, I would say that they're relatively close. I think Cloud9 is the better team. I don't think it's by a lot, though. You can tell that by records, right? They're very, very close in record, and it's because I think they're relatively close in skill level. You would never have expected that at the beginning of the year. Dignitas is not a team that you would think would be on that same level as Cloud9, but right now they're playing like it. So shout out to Cloud9, a team that continues to kind of improve and show growth throughout the season. And Dignitas, someone who continues to overextend expectations, even without some of their young players that you feel like they would need someone like XU to really take that next step after a really good spring. He's actually taken quite a step back, but this team, I think, has taken a general step forward. Bringing on Insanity, Spawn has taken a huge step up. JJ has continued to be one of the best supports in Academy. I think this Dignitas team has continued to impress a lot of people, me included, and I for one, hope it continues throughout the rest of the year. Moving on to the second series here of Day 3 action, we had Team Liquid Academy taking on Immortals Academy. TLA taking the 2-0 series win here as Immortals continues their free fall. This 0-6 week is about as bad as it can get for them, but TL Academy going 5-1 this week. They've got to be very, very excited. They continue to look just dominant, like completely and utterly dominant. And a lot of that is just off the back that their bot lane is just too freaking good, huh? Like Yeon and Ayla are just too good. They are, I said it earlier in this week, they are a top 4 to 5 bot lane in North America right now. They would be better than most bot lanes in the LCS. I truly, truly believe that. I think a lot of organizations believe that as well, because I think a lot of them have inquired. Obviously, we know that they don't want to take an offer to leave until they really know that they're going to get a situation that they want to be in. But I expect to see these two as a duo starting in LCS next year very, very quickly. Yeon's going to get my player of the series here. He was really phenomenal. That game 1 on Kalista. We talked about Ayla on Amumu, and it continues to be a really, really strong pick for Ayla, but the Kalista as well continues to be a ridiculously strong pick for Yeon. We always knew him for these more shifty AD carries. You know, I don't know what else to say. The Ezreal, the Zeri, the picks that I think we know Yeon a lot more for, but the Kalista has really become part of his repertoire and has become one of his best picks. And then he shows it off in game 1 here as he absolutely obliterates. Game 2 as well. You have the Zeri Sona bot lane, which is just such a fun bot lane to play into. You have the Aurelia mid, the Sylas top, the double flex there that I really like in draft. Overall, I just really like what TL is able to do here. Bradley has a really phenomenal game 2 here on the Sylas. Obviously, we've talked about this in the past with Team Liquid, where the opportunity that they have and the flexibility that they have having a mid laner in the top lane, someone who is comfortable playing all these flex champions, you know, the Sylas, the Aurelia, like you can do all these picks and make it very difficult to have any idea of how to play into them, and I think that plays to their strengths a lot. Bradley continues to look good in the top lane, especially when the rest of his team is looking good. I'm not convinced that he's like one of the best top laners in Academy by himself, but he definitely looks like one on this team. Armeo continues to be there. I don't think he's the best or the worst player, in the world. Just kind of is there here for a really, really good Team Liquid team, and they're just firing on all cylinders, really. As for Immortals, what a terrible week for them. I mean, really, like I said, they've been in free fall mode for quite a while now, and this is kind of the extent of that, right? Like, this is as bad as it probably is going to get for them, because holy crap, like going 0-6 this week is just not good. It's not good at all. Nobody on this team really looked that good. I mean, Pretty definitely had his moments. He had a pretty good game here on the Corki in game 2. Did a lot of damage, but also died like a lot. At the same time, the rest of this team doesn't really hold up. Chad has another bad series here. He's going to get my dud of the series here for Immortals. The top side of this map continues to be a huge issue. Arrow and Joey were the positive, like the really big bright spot for Immortals, I think, for a lot of spring. They've really cooled down a lot. I think their time in LCS actually hurt their confidence a lot. I'm not really sure if that's going to continue, but Joey at times has been one of the best supports in the region, or in terms of Academy. And right now, he was really rough this week. Arrow did nothing. I don't really mean to be like pro or against Arrow. He was just non-existent this week, which is a pretty big negative for a team that's really struggling. So outlook-wise, Immortals is got to be feeling hyper concerned, I think is the word I'm looking for, about how shitty this week went for them, quite frankly. And Team Liquid's got to be the opposite. Going 5-1's got to feel really, really good for this roster. They continue to look like the best team in Academy. They have to be the favorites for Proving Grounds. And I imagine they will stay that way, especially with Yeon and Ayla and Hyeri all on this roster. Those three, I think, will make any team in this part of the, in Academy, like in this level, the favorites to win it all. Moving on to our third series here of day 3, we had TSM Academy taking on 100 Thieves Academy in a 1-1 split that I think TSM is going to be very, very happy about, going up against one of the best teams in the region, or in the league here, in the Academy League, and being able to pull out a win against them in Game 2 here that was, well, up in the air for quite a bit. It was a good finish from TSM, but at the end of the day, 100 Thieves is the better team here. They were the better team in Game 1. They looked like they probably were the better team in Game 2. They just kind of got out to a pretty bad lead here and made some bad macro decisions. Giving away that Baron was pretty costly in Game 2. But for 100 Thieves here, I think really they show that they are still very mechanically talented and very, very good at like maintaining success, even if it's almost immediately thrown away by weird macro decisions. Jimmy's going to get my player of the series here, although I think you could realistically give this to Tenacity up in the top lane as well. Both of them were very, very good this series. I thought Jimmy was doing a boatload of damage here on the Corki. Obviously, this is a pick that we've known is his favorite for quite a long time. Go look at the amount of games that he's put on Corki in Academy. It's pretty ridiculous, but Jimmy's going to get it for me. Tenacity also had a pretty good one here. Good game of Kale in Game 1, and then a pretty solid Silas game in Game 2, even if they weren't able to do much. I actually think this one is one of the few series this year that I think were kind of decided by 100 Thieves solo laners, whereas I think a lot of what they've done this year so far has been Will, like really dictating the tempo. But Will, I thought, was a little up and down in this series, especially even in their win in Game 1. I thought Anda actually had a pretty decent one, and then in Game 2, I thought Anda made some really interesting macro decisions that actually were a big reason why TSM was actually able to pull out a win here. But let's talk about what else TSM did right. Takeover, I thought, had a pretty good series. Takeover continues to look a lot better ever since Anda joined the team. I'm not sure if Hyper really was just like the full problem for TSM and for Takeover in particular, but ever since Anda has joined, I think Takeover specifically has looked a lot more unlocked. He's looked a lot more free. It feels like he feels more comfortable to play more aggressive now, and that's definitely a good thing to see. The bot lane was fine. They were up and down. I thought Game 1 they weren't as good as they were in Game 2, but Tactical actually had a really good Xayah game in Game 2 here. The Xayah Rakan, I think, might be a lane that they go to a little bit more. Tactical has always looked pretty good on that champion, but, you know, obviously if they don't get the Kalista, which has always been Tactical's favorite, I can see them going to that a little bit more. The negative for TSM definitely was Solo here in the top lane, who is going to get my dud of the series. He had a rough one. He actually had a pretty rough week here in his first week back in Academy. The Gangplank game in Game 1 was not good. Yes, you're going into Kale, but at the same time, like, you need to win that matchup early, and he very much did not. And then Game 2, he was just straight up outplayed. Like, the Silas and Ornn matchup, I think Ornn can definitely win, but it did not happen. It was not even really that close. Tenacity was just the better player in this series by a lot. And yeah, you can make the real argument that Tenacity is just, like, far and away the best top laner in Academy, but at the same time, you still don't want to see Solo losing quite like this. So, outlook-wise for both of these teams, TSM continues to look okay. They definitely look better than they did a week ago in terms of how their Academy team looks. Like, because a week ago, I would have told you this is easily the worst Academy team in the region. But right now, they, you know, being able to take a game off of 100 Thieves, who is one of the top 2 teams, I think they're definitely going to be happy about that. I think Anda continues to look like an upgrade. Tactical and Mia definitely seem like they're getting a little bit of their confidence back. I do think that's going to be a little bit more of a process than drop them in for a couple of weeks and they'll be back in as soon as you know it. But, you know, it definitely does seem to be happening little by little, which is a good thing for them. As for 100 Thieves, like, they're okay. Like, this wasn't the week that you wanted to see from a top team. Honestly, they didn't look nearly as good this week as they've looked a lot of the season. They didn't look as good as a team like Cloud9 has looked, I think, for a lot of the season. Or for this week, I should say. And that's definitely a little concerning. They're still a very, very good team. Like, I don't want to take away from the fact that, like, they're still great. You still have some of the best players in your role in Tenacity, Will, Busio. These are all some of the best players in their roles. But at the end of the day, like, you need to be able to win these series 2-0, and they just weren't able to do that. Shout out to Jimmy and Tenacity for really being able to pull through and kind of help this team out a lot. But the spot lane still needs to step up, and Will needs to get a little bit more consistent if this team really wants to be the best team in Academy like they want to be. Moving on to the fourth series here of day 3. we had Evil Geniuses Academy taking on CLG Academy in a 1-1 split that really did not deserve to be a 1-1 split. That's the best way that I could put this, because EG was the better team in both of these games by quite a considerable margin, and unfortunately they just couldn't hang on in Game 1, which is really, really frustrating to see. Obviously, big shout out to Triple. He had a really great game in Game 1 on the Corki, and it was a big reason why they were able to win that, but at the end of the day, that was EG's game to lose, and they absolutely did. Game 2 was a little bit of a different story, very much EG in control from moment 1, and they were able to just kind of steamroll through. Tomio on the Poppy was able to control pretty much the whole map, and then Kaori on the Aphelios was the hyper carry in terms of damage, but a really, really good series here in general from Tomio. He had a phenomenal Game 1. He was a big reason why they should have won that Game 1, is he had a great game here on the Viego, and then another really good one on the Poppy here in Game 2. He was just phenomenal in this series. Overall, a very deserving player of the series. Probably one of, if not his complete best series in Academy since joining in spring. He's definitely had his ups and downs as a player, but this was a very, very good reminder that he was a top prospect for a reason. A lot of people had a lot of hype on him for a reason coming out of amateur and coming out of scouting grounds. A lot of people had a lot of hype on Tomio, and he really proved that here in this one. But he wasn't the only member of this team to have played well. Like I said, this bot lane played well here. Kaori and Smoothie continue to be one of the more consistent bot lanes in Academy, even if their team record doesn't necessarily show that. They continue to show up, even if some of the rest of the team doesn't. Luckily for them, the rest of the team did show up here, and they looked pretty solid. So EG continues to kind of roll. As for CLG, you really want to see better out of Kevy. Kevy comes in here to replace Rosethorn, who was really good in spring and has been really bad in summer. Kind of a dichotomy of two different players there. And so I think when they brought in Kevy as a full-time replacement for him, they were hoping to get a little bit more consistency out of that. So far, it has not shown up. Kevy has not been very good in the few games that he has played in Academy so far this week. I think he's been relatively a weak link for the CLG team. Not to say he was the only problem or anything like that, but he was definitely the biggest problem. He's going to get my dud of the series here. Jenkins was also not so great in this one, although I don't know how much I put that on him and how much I put that on the matchups here, because playing Gnar into two very aggressive picks like Aurelia and Silas can sometimes be a little bit of a problem if you're not getting jungle support. And he very much did not get a lot of jungle support in this one because, like I said earlier, Tomio was just outplaying Kevy pretty much the entire series. So, outlooks for these two teams. Actually, before I do that, I should mention the good parts of CLG, which is, like I said, Triple thought I had a really good Game 1 here on the Corki. Was a big reason they were able to take that Game 1. And I thought Meech actually played pretty well here, too. Meech is someone who I think has come in and been, you know, we've talked about a lot of these new AD carries coming into relatively good teams. We talked about BMFX. I think Meech was put in a similar position. However, I think Meech has probably performed a little bit better than someone like BMFX has up until this point in the season. He's actually shown a lot of really interesting things in terms of his development so far. I really like what he's been able to do. And then Breezy, like I said, has been hyper consistent. So now we can move on to the outlook. And outlook-wise for these two teams, both of them are average teams. I think CLG is probably a little bit of a better team, but they certainly didn't look like it today. Evil Genius has actually had a really good week comparatively to how they've played, I think, a majority of the season so far. EG has kind of really outplayed themselves this week, and I think that's a good sign. Surdy continues to get better. Tomio continues to get better. They've been the two biggest weak links, I think, for this Evil Geniuses Academy team so far this year. If they continue to get better, I expect this team to continue to grow. As for CLG, they really need this jungle position to really solidify itself because Rosethorn wasn't getting it done. Kevy doesn't look like he's going to be the one getting it done. That's too important of a role in the meta right now for them to not have a player there that really feels like they can win if they want to compete at the highest level of Academy and Proving Grounds. And right now they're just relying a lot on Triple to carry a lot of games for them. And I don't know if that's a viable strategy for them to work in the long haul, but we'll see. Right now, obviously, I think both of them are fine teams, and both of them showed things in the series that were good. It's just about how they continue to grow and develop from this point onward. That's going to finally bring us to our 15th and final series of the week here in our final series of Day 3, which was, of course, Golden Guardians Academy taking on FlyQuest Academy. And FlyQuest taking the 2-0 series win here, kind of getting back to their roots a little bit here against a team that they should be beating pretty comprehensively, and they do. They do beat them comprehensively off of the back of UG being really good. Let's talk about Game 1 here. Lee Sin just took over, was able to get the Corki and the Jinx so far ahead. I mean, this game was never close to the point where, obviously, they're going to do a billion damage from ahead, and they were able to. Lee Sin was super active early game. That's kind of how you have to play that champion, and it very much worked out. Then in game 2, kind of a similar story. Yuji being very active, able to get Kumo a lot of advantages in the top lane here, got him really ahead on the Gnar, and was also able to get Tomo some gold. Obviously, SuperKmanrocks got some gold, not really a ton in the mid lane, but overall, just a really good series here from Yuji, kind of facilitating everything that FlyQuest wanted to do in both games 1 and 2. He's going to get my player of the series here. I know I've talked a little bit of shit about him in this episode already so far, but at the end of the day, when I say that he's like a mid to lower tier like jungler in the region, that means he is going to beat up on the junglers that are bottom tier, and the teams that are bottom tier, like, no offense, like Golden Guardians Academy has been so far this year, and like Acadian has been so far this year. Yuji was really just able to control the entire map. When he's the better player, he definitely shows it on the Rift like he did in this one. But big shout out to Kumo, like I said, for that game 2 on the Gnar. He continues to look a lot better in Academy than he ever did in LCS. Obviously, that should be the case, but it's good to see him get his confidence back a little bit. And then SuperKmanrocks continues to be probably the most unsung hero in Academy right now. Probably the best player that no one is talking about. He's been really, really good for this FlyQuest Academy team all year long. And he's continued to do that. He had a really good Corki game in game 1. And a good Azir game in game 2. Not that he really had to do too much. But SuperKmanrocks, I think, is a name that you should probably look out for as someone who is really not getting a lot of attention and a lot of buzz, but has actually been really, really good so far this year. As for Golden Guardians, they continue to just not be very good. They continue, in my opinion, to be the worst Academy team by a considerable margin. Concept continues to show that he's just not ready to be a top laner in Academy right now. He showed that for Immortals last split. He comes over to Golden Guardians, has a couple of really bad games here. Obviously, his signature Mundo in game 1 doesn't work. His Sejuani in game 2 doesn't work. He's going to get my dud of the series here. He continues to be a problem for this roster. Not the only problem, but definitely a problem. Acadian continues to look like one of the worst junglers in Academy. Unfortunately, his double coach jungler duty just isn't working out for this team, and Ryoma continues to not... Ryoma and Prismo, I think both, honestly, continue to not look like they are ready to immediately rejoin from Amateur, even after being two of the best Academy players, you know, in recent memory. They both have rejoined recently and just been bad, not good. And poor Array, like, I talked about this earlier this week, I say his name so little on this channel because he just doesn't do anything in these games. Not that it's entirely his fault, obviously his team is losing across the board, and as an AD carry, that can be something that can be pretty hard to overcome, but at the same time, like, he doesn't make plays, he doesn't make active plays for his team, which I think definitely doesn't make Golden Guardians a better team overall, so. Outlook-wise, like I said, Golden Guardians is the worst team in Academy, in my opinion. It's pretty comprehensive and it's pretty clear. They're just not very good. They have way too many flaws. Maybe that will change once Leader comes in, but it's certainly not something I'm expecting. FlyQuest continues to beat up on the lower tier teams, and I think that's something that they will continue to do throughout the year. They're relatively consistent and a lot better when they are the better team, and I think that's definitely what we're seeing in a matchup like this, but I'm definitely going to need to see a lot more from this team in order to feel confident about saying that they're going to be like top 5 or top 6 come Proving Grounds time. I think they're right around that 6 mark, but, you know, I think that's pretty crowded right now, so it's going to be difficult for them to permanently grasp onto that slot. I think a win here definitely helps, but we're going to have to see a lot more consistency out of this team before I really start believing in them for the rest of the year. All right, that is going to do it for my Week 5 NA Academy overview and analysis of all 15 series, all 30 games. An absolute undertaking that this video was, especially with COVID. If you guys enjoyed, please go ahead and leave a like. But up on your screen right now, you are seeing the current updated standings in Academy. The first column is going to be my power rankings. The second column is going to be how those have changed from the last week. In most regions, I go from 1 to 10 or rank them, you know, but in Academy, it just doesn't feel like the point. So for me, I am just going to be ranking them in terms of tiers. I think that gives you a better understanding of where these teams are at, because 1 to 10, honestly, doesn't really matter right now. It'll matter more for Proving Grounds, but right now, it just doesn't matter as much. Let's talk about some risers. Cloud9 jumping up into A tier, I think, is definitely a riser. And they're going to be happy about that. Team Liquid jumping up from A tier to S tier. I think they've really separated themselves from the rest of the pack. They've really become the best team in Academy by a pretty wide margin. And then, in my opinion, Evil Genius is jumping up from C tier to B tier. TSM also jumping up from D tier to C tier. As for the people who are falling, not a lot of actual fallers this week. Immortals falling from B tier to C tier, obviously a pretty awful week for them. 3 losses in a row, and they ended last week with a loss as well. Not good at all. That's probably about as worst case scenario as you can get for them. They're the only faller this week, and they absolutely deserve it. Usually teams get better around this point in the season. They have gotten consistently and significantly, in my opinion, worse. But that's going to bring us to our player of the week and our dud of the week. My player of the week for week 5 is going to go to Triple from CLG Academy. Triple was really, really solid this week. He continues to be the main driving force for a CLG team that I think has its ups and downs, but for the most part has a lot of ups and has continued to look better throughout the year. The dud of the week, for me, pretty obvious, has to go to Vital on Immortals Academy, who just continues to look like a weak link for that team. You could give it to Concept as well, definitely something I considered, but at the end of the day, I thought Vital and this Immortals team in general just deserved the dud of the week after going 0-6. Probably the worst case scenario. So yes, Vital is my dud of the week, and Triple is my player of the week for week 5. But yes, that is going to do it for my week 5 analysis. Like I said, I am absolutely exhausted after making this video. If you guys enjoyed it, please go ahead and leave a like. It would mean a lot to me. Obviously, COVID definitely takes its toll on you. And talking for, almost 3 hours now in terms of raw audio has definitely been an experience. So if you guys enjoyed it, I really would mean a lot to me if you guys liked the video. Let me know what your series of the week was down in the comment section below. Your player of the week, your dud of the week, all that stuff. You know I love chatting it up with you guys. But with that being said, I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you continue to have a great day. And I will see you all later.